I'm part of the group called Co-operative Care Colne Valley, and I've shared this photo not just because it's a nice picture, but I think it shows something quite important about where I live in terms of the terrain and how that impacts on our business model. Because one of the big things about our care business, and we are running a home care service, um, is the time and distance it takes to travel between people's houses. And that's quite a key factor really in terms of business planning. So, and the fact that we are living in this landscape which is full of valleys means that you get communities along valley bottoms generally, and not so much along the top. So moving from one community into the next means sort of going over the top into the next valley, and that, you know, there can be quite a lot of time involved in that. So I just thought it'd be really important to mention that point actually, because it's not always obvious. So anyway, moving on, if I can. Yeah, so we're a place-based organisation. We're based in this place called the Colne Valley in West Yorkshire. Our model and our approach means that we're led by local people. We provide a regulated home care service. So this is CQC regulated domiciliary care, to use the jargon. So our people look after the people we care for in their own homes. Our whole approach is about inclusivity. We're born out of a sort of a social movement of active citizens, and I'll talk a little bit more about that history just to give you some context in a moment. We're structured as a community benefit society, which is a particular flavour of cooperative, and as part of that, we're registered with the Financial Conduct Authority. They're the regulatory organisation that looks after these types of legal entities. And obviously, we're a cooperative, so we're committed to the values and principles of cooperation. That's what we do. So a bit of context, bit of background. So the conversation that led to our creation goes back to about 2017, 2018, pre-pandemic. If you can cast your mind back that far, it's quite a long time ago. But you know, the world was in quite a different place then. And there was some issues floating around, the crisis in social care then as now. That's not changed at all. The fact that what we were seeing was a general disrespect and poor treatment of people working in the care sector, and I think that's still true today, and a lack of access to care for people in need. So there was, I think some of those problems are being addressed, but at that point in time, it was clear that there was more demand than there was supply in the so-called care market, and so we wanted to try and address that. That situation had changed quite a lot in the intervening years, and that's something that I guess in terms of your business planning, you'll need to take account of for your project. Certainly here at the moment in my locality, there is more supply now than there is demand, and that has come about as a result of the pandemic largely, we think. But we think also that picture's starting to shift again now. So that's something that's really, really crucial, I think, in terms of trying to develop a sustainable business operation in this sector. And of course, you know, we're operating in context where local government and NHS, at that point, we're really struggling. Local government has been defunded by the government of the day for the last decade or more. That picture might be slowly starting to change, but I'm not holding my breath. And obviously we've got this sort of NHS situation that we're probably all well aware of. And these are two big purchasers of the care services that we provide. So their financial health and well-being is critical to our business. Actually, not a huge amount has changed with those four sort of real pinch points that drove our idea to do something in this market. Moving on, our vision is very simple. We just want looking to do something to intervene in this space. We were a group of people that live locally, and we said, we were really worried about what was happening. So we came together to try to intervene. The choice being that we could have stood aside and done nothing and been passive consumers of whatever was available. But as a community, we decided that we wanted to try and change the situation a bit in our favour. So we chose to intervene, and these are the groups that we're interested in working with and supporting. So service users and their families, people who work in care, our staff, members of the wider community. Those are the three big issues that we want to try and work in context of and try and improve the positions of. And we've also got this fourth thing, which we were very keen on and remains a really sort of key point in our organisational thinking, which is about achieving scale through replication and adaptation and federation, rather than through becoming a large monolithic business. And this was driven really by about being accountable to the local community, being responsible to the community that we serve, and being accessible. So if you're a large monolithic corporate organisation, it becomes increasingly difficult for ordinary people to access that organisation and understand it and work with it. If anyone's tried to get sense out of a public utility, for example, it's really challenging because they're very remote. They don't relate in the same way. So we wanted to stay small so that somebody in our local community could see themselves without special training or qualifications or anything like that. They could see themselves as being a useful and effective member of our board of directors. They didn't need to be an accountant or a specialist in care or any of these other things. So that was some of the stuff that was affecting our thinking around how big we needed to be and how we grow. Also, I mentioned that we're a society for the benefit of community rather than a worker co-op or a cooperative society, which is run for the benefit of its members only. And that was a conscious decision, because when we did our planning and our sort of theory of change work right at the beginning of the process, we came to realise that if we were going to be successful in the long term, we were going to have a positive impact on our wider community, not just the people who worked for the organisation, not just the people we looked after, but the people who are outside of the organisation in the communities that we serve, and we were going to have an impact there. And that was part of the broader vision of the organisation. So that's why we set up using the model that we did. So as I say, directly trying to address some of the fault lines in the care system. We really like the Italian social cooperative model, which is quite popular and very successful in parts of Italy, where they provide care, but they also provide a whole range of other services around that as well. And we're not in this thing to make profit or anything like that. When we of the view really that this sort of service needs to operate sort of beyond any concept of market, outside of the market really. We're trying to develop multi-stakeholder governance, and I'll talk a little bit more about that a bit. And we're trying to integrate this concept of regulated care within a sort of a broader community-based provision. And we did a lot of that thinking around that at the beginning, but where we are now is we've sort of set a lot of that aside, and for fairly sensible reasons, I think. But we're looking to sort of come back and look at that again. And this idea of sort of organised neighbourliness, in a sense, is something that we're trying to build. One of the people that we spoke to a few years ago is a guy who'd been working on the south coast in Torbay, and they were running a sort of a social care organisation in the broadest possible sense, where they were being funded by their local authority out of the social care budget, because what they were doing wasn't really delivering social care, but it was about preventing the need for social care. So they had, if you rang them up, the first person who would answer the phone would be somebody who would be a sort of a recipient of service, and rather than a professional. And the first thing they would ask you is, what would you like to contribute, rather than what do you need? And their whole model was about trying to give people purpose and a sense of belonging, because what they've found is that if people have those things, then they stay healthier, their well-being goes up, and they don't need to rely on care services quite as much. So it's really positive outcomes. So they were being funded by their local authority out of the social care budget because they were reducing the demand on that budget by the work that they were doing. And that was something that I thought was really inspirational, and something that we would aspire to working towards within our own thing. So going back to the story, I suppose, benefits for service users. We wanted to ensure that the people involved had a real say in shaping the service. Wanted to try and move beyond this idea of time and task, and include develop sort of social activities and provide a broad-based care regime which was about enabling people to live the lives they wanted to live. Rather than someone said the other day, sticking a butty in front of somebody is the sort of the basic sort of provision in many contexts. Certainly for the groups that we work with, older adults, and some, to a lesser extent, adults with disabilities. We're trying to work with our staff team to bring them into these sort of cooperative contexts much more, improve care quality through their well-being. And obviously, we're very keen to sort of treat staff as well as we can possibly afford to. So we're always looking to keep our pay rates as high as we possibly can, whilst not impacting the sustainability of the business. Trying to develop this sort of idea of a holistic approach, really. So staff members being treated as professionals, they have a say in shaping the service, staff representation on the board. These sorts of things are basic principles that we're trying to live to. We're an accredited real living wage employer. We pay people for the travel time between appointments. We pay people for training time that they undertake. We don't ask them to pay for their own uniforms or pay for their own DBS checks and these sorts of things, which is often the case in the sector. So we're trying to work really hard to build a great package of terms and conditions for the people that work with us. We're trying focus on having locally based teams. Again, partly to minimise travel and impact on the environment, but also just because it's better, because people know each other better and you get more continuity of service. And trying to build this idea of professional development, people not just being in care as a short-term job, but as a career. Wider community benefits. We think that by doing what we're doing, we're contributing to local wealth building. We're filling a gap, or at least when we started, we were filling a gap, a clear gap. That's less the case now, but I think there are still challenges there. We're about community cohesion and building resilience in our community, and trying to work together with other organisations in our community to provide a sort of more of a meshed approach, and offer something to the local authorities and the statutory agencies who are looking to develop a more preventative approach. I talked a little bit about the strawberry patch type model, where we grow through replication and federation rather than becoming a big monolithic organisation in their own right. We got some funding from Power to Change some years ago to assist with that, and that helped us build some resource which we're very keen to share, and I hope that you'll be able to pick that up and use it and develop it further. We think that the way forward, a key way forward here is about collaboration between organisations. So you can achieve some economies of scale through shared back office services, whilst maintaining that very much locally centred, locally owned and controlled approach. But you can get the economies of scale by taking some of the back office stuff and centralising that. We think there's real scope to do stuff there, because then once you start building your business plan, you'll realise that you've got some fixed central office costs that you really have to try and streamline. This is a website that we built with our Power to Change funding, and we're keen to see that develop into a shared resource. So we're very happy to provide logins for people there, and so people can go in and edit and build more content there and rewrite the old stuff that we wrote a few years ago and improve it and build on it. We think that it's taken us an enormous amount of time to develop the expertise and the skills that we've got now, and the knowledge that we've got, and the learning from all the mistakes that we've made along the road. And we're very keen for people and organisations that want to follow in those footsteps, so that they can accelerate their process by not making those same mistakes. So we can hopefully point them out early and stop you, enable you to go further faster, really. Some challenges that we faced along the road, which we didn't really know were coming when we started up back in 2019. We were registered as a cooperative in 2019. We started trading in 2020, just as the pandemic hit. And obviously COVID was a massive game changer for what we do. Initially, it was actually quite positive because it freed up lots of resource, and we got funded to do things at a very early stage in our life, which was really helpful. But obviously, it's had long-term impacts, which have totally changed the face of the operation. After COVID, we had all that stuff with energy price hikes and the cost of living crisis, which have obviously impacted us, because some of the providers that we compete with that are much bigger and uglier than we are able to ramp up pay rates. We were less able to respond in that context. So we've had some recruitment challenges. It's really difficult to recruit experienced senior people. We've had some internal people issues along the road, which have been really challenging for us and difficult to resolve and costly in terms of time and money. We've had a situation which I think everybody in our sector probably faces, where it's in the nature of looking after older people that their care needs ramp up and up and up, and then all of a sudden they'll go into residential care, or they'll go into hospital, or they'll die. And that's a reality of the industry, I guess. But what happens is that you've ramped up your capacity to deliver support to that person, and then all of a sudden they disappear, and the revenue disappears at the same time. And that's really quite challenging to deal with sometimes. So we have that as an ongoing problem. So we're thinking strategically about how we can mitigate the risk on that sort of stuff. And then most recently, in the spring of this year, our lovely government brought in the changes to employers' NI, which we think is going to cost us around about £10,000 or £12,000 a year straight out of our bottom line. So that's a really significant impact on our operation. A few key learning points.
Graham, we might have to run through these a bit quickly.
Yeah, sorry, I'm very close to.
No, that's okay. No worries.
So points of advice: it'll probably take you longer than you think. So don't think you can set a business up in 5 minutes. It'll probably take you more money than you think. We had 165,000 in working capital when we started, and we pretty much burnt all of that. So if I was going to do it again, I'd probably be looking to raise at least twice that. And this is a really complicated business to operate. It's not straightforward stuff. We're operating sustainably now after 5 years, but we're still quite fragile as a business. We need to grow further significantly in order to build reserves and resilience in our organisation. We've made a huge number of mistakes, despite having some fantastic expertise in our team. We've learned an enormous amount of stuff. We're beginning to get some things right. We're convinced of the need to cooperate across other organisations and other geographies in order to develop the sector. We think that's vital as a way forward. We want to use our cooperative values and principles to drive the next phase in our development, continue to collaborate with other initiatives. We think a network, which we've done some work to develop a few years back, but had to take a bit of a backseat more recently. We think that's really important, and this idea of shared services we think is crucial. That's me, I think.